Hey everybody, I'm Dia with the Siren News, and I'm the artist behind the siren image you see at the beginning of the news. For this segment, I just kind of wanted to go over my process and everything into making the siren image, starting off with the poses. Going into the sketching, I pretty much knew what I wanted to do. Siren sitting on a rock with a ship coming in from the distance. I played around with a few versions, her just sitting there, her reaching out towards the ship, or her singing and calling them forth. I ended up going with just the sitting pose. Going into actually designing the siren, I wasn't quite sure what I was going to do. I had a few ideas in my head, but hadn't settled on anything concrete. I knew I didn't want to make her too girly or too generic mermaid, but I also didn't want to go too far the other way and make her too mythological or creepy. So I hope what you see in the final image is just a good mix between the two. An example of me kind of struggling on her character design is her hair. I went through a few different variations of her hair before I settled on the beachy wave hair that she has. I struggled to figure out what I exactly wanted, giving her straight hair, then braids, then eventually landing on the wavy hair once I asked a friend for their opinion. Going over to the colors, I was also going in completely blind. I shifted between a bunch of different tail colors before I settled on this really pretty blue. As for the skin, I went over it multiple times, going with a more grayish blue, then a more peachy skin tone, then a kind of peachy skin tone with a grayish undertone. Going over to the hair, I also kind of wasn't sure what I wanted. I ended up narrowing it down to 3 choices and having a friend pick the one that they liked the best. Settling on the strawberry blonde pinky color, with some faded blue and green streaks mixed in. Fun fact, the scarf around her waist belongs to Pirate Pete. There are 3 hypothetical reasons why she has it. 1, he gave it to her because they're friends. 2, she lured him in with a siren song. Or 3, they're married. Which one's true? That's up to you. Shifting over to work on the background, I started out with the water, adding waves and curves and color to make it look like, well, water. Then I went over to the sky, adding the sunset and the clouds and all of the shading and detail that would go into that, before then going back over and adding the rock where our siren sits so that she's just not floating above the water. Then finally adding the ship. The ship was a bit of a struggle for me, more than anything else in the drawing, mostly because I wasn't well versed in ship anatomy, and I'm still not. I feel like if I could have gone back and done it again, I would do it a lot better, but you know, you live and you learn. Something I want to add regarding the ship again, I wish I had done the flag better, adding more curves and folds to it to make it look like it was actually being blown by the wind. If I could have done it better, I would. It's another one of you live, you learn things. So the way I do it in my personal art is I like an illustrated character with a rendered background. Obviously, because this was for a school project, I wanted to be more professional, so I went ahead and started rendering our siren. I made a few attempts at rendering our siren in Procreate, which is what I used for the majority of the drawing. Finding no success in that, I booted it over to Photoshop, hoping I would find better tools to help me in this endeavor. Moving it over to Photoshop, I used the mixer brush to start blending out the lines and making everything more smooth and more dynamic. Trying my best to make sure that you can't see the line art lines. For those who don't know what the mixer brush is, it's basically a paintbrush causing the space in Photoshop to act more like a canvas. You can change the settings on the mixer brush, like how wet the paint is, or how much of the color you want to put down, or how much of the layer underneath you want to pick up. Or you could just use it as a blending tool, which is what I'm using it for. After doing that though, I realized there was a small issue. You can't really tell what's from what once everything's blended together. So I used the adjustment brush on brightness and contrast to add shadow and definition, going in and defining the arm, putting shadow under the rock where she's sitting, shadow to the hair, shadow to the ship. And though it's not shown on the video, I did layer it up quite a bit. And when that was finished, I added another layer, going back in with the adjustment brush, still on brightness and contrast, but this time on a brighter setting to add highlights. Anywhere it would naturally fit or the light would shine. Then once I was done with that, I finished up my rendering, adding more adjustment layers and shadow and everything to make it kind of round out together. And that's how I made the siren thumbnail. This was a very fun opportunity and I'm very glad I got to work on it, and then given this opportunity again to talk about it. So I hope you enjoyed this little in-depth on how I made the siren picture. This is Dia from the Siren News, signing off.